Welcome to this episode of the Aquarist Edge, a podcast for home aquarists just like you. Learn more about how to keep a thriving aquarium and discover ideas and tips to give your aquarium the edge. And now, over to our host, Arthur Preston.
You walk up to your tank to enjoy seeing the fish and the serenity of your aquarium, and all you see instead is a bunch of algae everywhere. Green on the glass, green hair algae everywhere in the crevices between the driftwood and the rocks. You see tufts of blackbeard algae growing on your plants, just not what you wanted to see. And there's really a desire for most home aquarists to rid their tank of unwanted algae. And while there is an argument to be made for algae in your tank, and that's perhaps a topic for another episode, for most home aquarists, there's a real desire to get rid of it. And sure, we can go and we can look at chemical solutions, but those come with their own problems. So how do we clean our tank with all this algae? In this episode, we're going to take a look at some algae-busters, fish and other animals that help us take care of our tanks in terms of ridding them of algae. So let's start by asking the question, what actually is algae and why is it such a big deal? Well, at a very base level, algae are just simple aquatic plants. They can quickly take over your tank if they're not managed properly. They can block light, they can deplete oxygen, and they can even harm your fish. Here are some common reasons that algae grow. Firstly, there's overfeeding. When you feed your fish too much, the excess food decomposes and provides nutrient for the algae. The same can be said for insufficient water changes. Not changing the water regularly can lead to a buildup of nutrients as well. But the most obvious one, and probably the one that's most known, is too much light. Algae love light. So if your tank is getting too much direct sunlight, or if you're using high-intensity aquarium lights, this can spur the algae growth. So let's ask the question, how can we get rid of this pesky algae in our tanks? Well, let's start with one of the most popular and effective algae eaters available, and that is the bristlenose plecostomus, or the bristlenose pleco, or for those who like shortcuts, the BNP. These are small armored catfish that are known for their unique appearance. They have bristle-like appendages on their heads, they've got a flat body, and they are fascinating creatures to watch in your tank. They're excellent grazers. They consume a number of types of algae, including green spot algae, diatom algae, and brown algae. They're great for medium-sized tanks. Probably around 90 litres or so would be probably a good start. And they prefer to stay near the bottom of the tank, close to hiding spaces like small caves and pieces of driftwood. So make sure to keep your bristlenose plecos feeling secure and non-stressed in your tank. Ensure that they have enough hiding places, and consider supplementing their diet with specific plecostomus food, sinking pellets. They do great with blanched vegetables, spinach and so forth. They're really pretty easy to keep, and they do a fantastic job in your tank in terms of helping clear the glass and your aquarium in totality of algae. Well, the next one is one that is easily confused with some other fish, and that is the Siamese algae eater. It's also a highly effective and popular choice. They have an incredibly voracious appetite for many types of algae, including hair algae and blackbeard algae. I recently had an outbreak of blackbeard in one of my tanks. I put 2 Siamese algae eaters in there, and within a couple of days, all the blackbeard algae was taken care of. They're best suited to medium to large tanks, and they're active and they're social, but they can become territorial, so rather keep them in groups to reduce their aggression. They tend to eat more algae when they're younger, and as they get older, they start to eat more of the food that you're feeding your fish. The most effective Siamese algae eaters are, in fact, your young ones. They do grow quite big, and I have one particularly large one in one of my tanks in the fish room, and when I have people visit, they often ask me, what is that fish? And when I tell them, they find it hard to believe that it is in fact an SAE or a Siamese algae eater, because the ones we see in the pet shops tend to be juveniles. While we're talking about catfish and so forth, what about the ottos? The otto cinclus. These are great in smaller tanks. They feed on soft green algae, and they're very effective at cleaning the glass and plant leaves. They are also suitable for smaller tanks, but they're best kept in groups. to ensure their well-being, a bit like keeping corries in groups as well. They have a sizable appetite, so if the algae is lacking, then supplement their diet with vegetarian options. Your baby marrows, blanched veggies, as I said earlier on as well, for the plecos. They also prefer well-oxygenated water and a temperature range of about 22 to 26, 27 degrees. If you're looking for something a little bit different, you could also look at the hillstream loach. I heard them described the other day as mini stingrays. Not entirely accurate, but they really are fascinating creatures. They're quite different to look at. They lie flat against the glass, they spread themselves out, and they're just a lot of fun. They're excellent at consuming flat types of algae, like diatom algae, and they're very good at cleaning large flat surfaces, such as the glass of the aquarium itself, aquarium rocks, and broad plant leaves. They can live in smaller to medium-sized tanks, but they're best in cooler waters with a more stable pH. They can also be territorial, so rather keep one loach or 3 loaches in a group. Also feed them high-quality sinking foods and ensure they have lots of hiding places and stable water conditions. But now, what about something other than a fish? What about snails? Well, many of the snails are pest snails, and we know that can become difficult to manage. So I would rather suggest that you look at the nearite snails. What's great about these is they don't breed in fresh water, so you don't have to worry about overpopulation. They are highly effective at devouring algae on glass, on rocks, and on plant leaves. They're very peaceful, and they are really low maintenance. Just ensure they have a balanced diet and a variety of surfaces to graze on. So those are the nearite snails, and they come in all different colours and designs as well. Last but not least, we have our shrimp. Now, yes, your Neocaridina and your other shrimp are able to graze on algae, absolutely, but the king of the algae eater shrimp is the amanos. These are fantastic at cleaning your tank of algae. They have a voracious appetite for any type of algae, including blackbeard and hair algae. Because they are small, they can get into narrow gaps between rocks and so forth, and they can grab algae that the other algae eaters can't reach. They're very tolerant to changes in water parameters, and they're really not that expensive. Just make sure your tank has lots of hiding places and restricted passages for them to thrive in. A group of at least 4 is recommended if you want to make a dent in your algae growth. So those are a couple of algae-busters, natural algae-busters you can use in your tank. But here are some general care tips to keep in mind. Make sure that the algae eaters you choose are compatible with your existing fish and your tank conditions. For example, the Siamese algae eaters and other territorial fish should probably be kept separately. Make sure your tank's large enough to accommodate the adult size of the algae eaters. Brazilian plecos, while not as big as the normal plecos, they do get quite large. And make sure that your tank is able to accommodate their growth. Some algae eaters may need supplemental feeding, especially if there's not enough algae in your tank. If they've done a good job, then it's possible that the algae in your tank is limited, and so make sure that you are feeding them beyond just supposing that they're eating the algae. There are way too many of these fish that you find in fish tanks that are chronically underfed and malnourished because the owners have simply, or the fish keepers have simply put them in the tank, expecting them to clean the algae, and then just left them and hoped that what was occurring naturally would suffice. It really doesn't. So make sure that you are feeding them additional foods. Different algae eaters are effective against different types of algae, so choose wisely based on your tank's needs. Do a bit of homework, go onto Google, do some reading, figure out for what type of algae you have in your tank and which of the animals is best suited to clearing that up. Monitor your water parameters regularly to ensure that they are within the acceptable range for your algae eaters. Make sure you've got hiding places. It obviously reduces stress and provides algae eaters a place to rest and hide. Avoid overcrowding. It's very tempting if you have a tank that has got a lot of algae in it to go to your local pet store, to your fish supplier, and buy loads of algae eaters. The problem with that, of course, is that when the algae's gone, then what do they eat? So rather avoid overcrowding. Just make sure that you get that natural balance in your tank. And of course, these are not miracle workers. You've still got to do your maintenance. Do your tank maintenance. Make sure you are also assisting by cleaning the glass of algae. Keep your tank clean, siphon the debris, change the water regularly, check your filters. All of these things maintain a balanced environment and reduce the risk of having this outbreak of algae in your tank. And there you have it. With the right algae-eating creatures, our natural algae-busters, and a few simple general aquarium maintenance tips, you can keep your aquarium clean and thriving. Always remember, balance is the key. Don't overfeed, change your water regularly, and provide the right environment for your algae-busters to do their job.
That's it for this episode of the Aquarist Edge. Please consider subscribing to this podcast so that you don't miss further episodes. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast, as this helps make it visible to others. Until next time, keep learning and discovering, and keep finding your Aquarist Edge in this captivating and fascinating hobby.